HOA stole my chickens, thought it was just feathers and silence. But I filed real livestock reports, traced the cover-up, and turned every threat into evidence. When the sheriff knocked on their leader's door, the coop wasn't the only thing that got cleaned out. Because in Texas, registered hens mean real handcuffs. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. When I left the city, I wasn't running from something. I was running to something, though I didn't know it then. A year ago, I bought a weathered two-bedroom fixer-upper at the edge of a quiet, homeowners association-bound neighborhood in Central Texas. The kind of place with mailboxes that all match and lawns trimmed to HOA-regulated uniformity. It wasn't flashy, but it had potential. More importantly, it had land. A quarter-acre of freedom in the form of sun-drenched backyard space. That's where I built the coop. Not just any coop. My grandfather's design. He raised chickens when I was a boy. Out past Fredericksburg, where the air always smelled like cedar and rain. His birds were gentle, golden-feathered Buff Orpingtons, and his favorite Miss Lacey, a blue-laced red Wyandotte, used to perch on the porch rail while he played harmonica. He passed when I was in college, but I kept his plans, folded and weathered in an old cigar box. Rebuilding that coop wasn't a hobby. It was a tribute. I started small, 6 hens, no roosters. I named them after jazz singers: Ella, Billy, Nina, Dinah, Sarah, and Etta. Each with a color-coded leg band and personality to match. I'd sit outside with coffee in the mornings, listening to their gentle clucking. I didn't realize how much peace they brought me until one day I caught myself smiling without a reason. The neighbors seemed fine. A retired couple next door gave me tomato seedlings. A teenager from down the block would lean over the fence to feed the birds mealworms. I thought I'd found the quiet life. Then she arrived. Meredith Vaughn. Mid-40s. Impeccable posture, perfectly pressed slacks. The kind of woman who introduced herself with a handshake so firm it felt like a dare. She was elected HOA president within 3 weeks of moving in. Fresh energy, they called it. Professional background in compliance. Someone else whispered. She came to my door once in late spring, clipboard in hand, smile sharp enough to slice bread. "I just wanted to say hello," she began, scanning over my shoulder toward the backyard. "And also remind you to submit your coop structure application form for approval." I blinked. Coop structure. What? It's in the handbook. Section 8. C. Any secondary structure, including animal enclosures, must be pre-approved by the Architectural Review Committee. She smiled wider. Of which I am. I explained it was a hobby, not commercial. That the birds were quiet, clean, enclosed. She nodded politely, but her eyes were already filing complaints in triplicate. Over the next few weeks, envelopes started arriving. Thin ones, thick ones, yellow highlighted and handled. Notice of violation. First warning, second warning, failure to comply. Each time I read one, it felt less like paper and more like pressure tightening. Neighbors stopped lingering at the fence. The teenager disappeared. Even the retired couple started glancing down when they walked past. Meredith hadn't just taken over the HOA. She'd taken over the tone of the neighborhood. It was subtle, at first. Just rules and letters. But there was something about her, too polished, too precise. Like she didn't just want the rules followed, she wanted to be the reason they were. I started locking the coop more carefully at night. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to lose everything I'd built, not just the birds, but the peace they gave me. And when that happened, Meredith Vaughn would learn that you don't steal a man's flock and expect him to just take it. The first letter was polite. "Dear Mr. Hill, we hope you're settling into the neighborhood comfortably." I almost smiled. It ended with a mild reminder about Section 14B of the Community Covenant, which, according to the underlined text, prohibited the keeping of unapproved livestock. There it was. Livestock, as if Ella and Billy were cattle instead of soft, feathered birds who'd never so much as pecked a toe. I shrugged it off. It had to be a mistake. The second letter arrived 3 days later, this one in bold print, with words like notice, compliance failure, and administrative fine, $50 per day. I reread it 3 times. Then I walked out to the coop, leaned on the fence, and looked at my girls. They blinked back at me, calm and clueless, their heads tilted like they were trying to understand the fuss. By the time the third envelope came, I didn't even bother opening it right away. I already knew who it was from. 2 days later, she showed up. Meredith Vaughn. Her heels clicked against the walkway like a metronome set to menace. Clipboard in hand, HOA polo tucked in so tightly it may as well have been stitched to her spine. She didn't greet me this time, just pointed to the coop. "Mr. Hale, your structure is in violation of Section 14B. Chickens are considered livestock, and no such animals are permitted on properties within HOA jurisdiction unless expressly approved through an architectural review petition." I blinked. "They're hens, Meredith. Not livestock. They're quieter than half the dogs on the street. Cleaner, too." She tapped her clipboard. "The law classifies them as livestock. It's not personal." That last part made me pause, because everything about her delivery felt personal. I explained again that the coop was small, enclosed, odor-free. I even offered to show her the biodegradable bedding I used and the zoning map I double-checked before building. I told her about my grandfather, about the legacy, about how I wasn't breeding or selling, just honoring a memory. She smiled like I was a toddler who'd just proudly presented a crayon drawing of a legal defense. "This isn't emotional, Mr. Hale. It's administrative, and right now, you're in breach." Then she handed me a printout, my running fine balance. Just like that. Over the next week, the pressure ramped up. Meredith posted a formal violation notice on my door. HOA letterhead and all, laminated against weather like it was a badge of shame. Then came the knock from another board member, Greg Winters, who once waved when I mowed the lawn. He avoided eye contact as he handed me an intent to escalate form. "We're just trying to keep things uniform," he muttered. I watched neighbors start to change. Conversations stopped when I walked by. One woman who used to compliment my marigolds suddenly didn't have time. The kid who loved the chickens gone. Parents probably told him to steer clear. The silence around me was growing faster than the fines. At the monthly HOA meeting, I showed up. It was held in the community clubhouse, folding chairs in a circle, coffee in a thermos that tasted like plastic and resentment. Meredith called the meeting to order with a gavel, of all things. She wore pearls for an HOA meeting. I raised my hand, spoke calmly, explained the zoning again, showed pictures of the coop. Passed around a letter from my vet confirming the birds posed no health hazard. Meredith let me talk, then smiled and read from the bylaws like a school principal reading someone their sentence. Per Section 14B, poultry shall be defined under the municipal classification of livestock, regardless of intent or scale. As such, unapproved livestock is grounds for enforcement action. There was no vote. No discussion. Just silence. The other board members didn't even glance my way. That's when I realized Meredith wasn't enforcing rules. She was rewriting culture, and everyone else was too afraid or too apathetic to stop her. I left the meeting with a fresh fine notice in my pocket and a feeling in my gut I couldn't quite place. Something was shifting. Something bigger than chickens. I just didn't know yet that I was standing at the edge of a cliff, and she was about to shove me. It was a Thursday. I remember that because I'd left work early. Light traffic, blue skies, nothing out of place. Until I pulled into the driveway. From the street, everything looked fine. The house stood quiet. Grass trimmed. Garden beds neat. But as I stepped out of the truck and glanced toward the backyard, something felt off. Too still. Too quiet. The coop was in view from my kitchen window. Always had been. I designed it that way. Could check on the girls while making coffee or washing dishes. But when I reached the back door and opened it, the silence hit me like a vacuum. No fluttering, no soft clucks. Just I crossed the yard slowly. The coop gate open. The latch was snapped. Not undone. Snapped. As if forced. The door to the nesting box hung loose, swinging gently in the breeze. Inside, the straw was flattened. Undisturbed. No feathers. No blood. No mess. Just absence. 6 birds. Gone. I dropped to my knees, checking every inch of the ground. Nothing. Not a single broken egg. No tracks. No signs of a predator. I knew what a raccoon raid looked like. This wasn't that. This was surgical. Deliberate. Clean. I stood there for a long while, hand gripping the fence post like it might steady the sudden spinning in my chest. I called animal control. A bored voice asked for my address, then sighed when I mentioned chickens. Yeah, probably a coyote, the guy said. It happens. I told him there were no signs of struggle. He asked if I had cameras. I did. I ran inside and pulled up the outdoor feed. I'd installed a small Wi-Fi cam just above the coop door, facing the gate. It had a motion trigger, saved files to a cloud account I barely touched. But when I opened the folder, empty. Every video from the past 2 days was gone. I called the camera company. They confirmed a manual deletion request had been made at 10:03 a.m. that morning from my IP address. I hadn't even been home. That's when my stomach truly dropped. I called the sheriff's non-emergency line next. Told them I believed someone had trespassed and stolen my registered poultry. I used the word theft carefully. I explained the broken lock, the erased footage. The deputy was polite, but firm. If this is an HOA matter, you'll want to talk to them first. I laughed, short, bitter. What if I think it was them? He paused. Unless you have direct evidence, we can't open a case. I dies talking to the board before escalating. As if someone hadn't already broken into my property and stolen 6 living animals. I sat in the dark that night, staring at the empty coop. My phone buzzed, messages from a few friends I'd told. Most just said, sorry man. But one neighbor, Anna, the retired teacher 2 doors down, texted something different. Saw a white SUV parked near yard this morning. Around 9:30, looked like Meredith. She was out back for a while. I asked if she was sure. Pretty sure. Didn't think anything of it at the time. Wish I'd taken a photo. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked outside again, flashlight in hand, scanning the ground for tire tracks. Nothing clear, grass had rebounded. Whoever did this knew how to leave no trace. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. Not just to punish me, but to send a message. They hadn't just taken my birds. They'd erased them, like they were never there. Like my grandfather's legacy meant nothing. I slept with the porch light on that night. Not out of fear, but something worse. Violation. Not just of rules or bylaws, of trust, of space, of memory. The coop stood like a gravestone. And I knew deep in my gut, this wasn't over. The woman at the front desk didn't look up at first. But when I said the words, felony livestock theft, she blinked and asked me to wait. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from Deputy Clark, a tired man with a badge that looked older than his boots. I laid out the paperwork, described the broken coop, the missing footage, the previous HOA threats, the neighbor who'd seen Meredith's SUV, the manual deletion request on my camera account. He didn't smile, didn't nod. He just listened. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said one thing. Did you say you had microchip IDs? I nodded. That got him moving. He made copies, took my statement, and said, we'll open an investigation under Section 41. You'll get a case number within 48 hours. It wasn't dramatic. No sirens, no banging on doors. But walking out of that station, folder in hand, I felt something I hadn't felt since the day Meredith knocked on my door. Control. I went home and rebuilt part of the coop. Not for the chickens. Not yet. Just as a statement. I fixed the lock, reinforced the fencing. Not out of hope, but defiance. I also changed all my passwords. Installed a second security camera facing the first. And set up cloud redundancy. 2 days later, the case number came in. And so did the first callback. It was Clark again. We reached out to the HOA president for a statement. She claims she was never on your property and has no knowledge of the birds. But she also didn't deny seeing them before. I asked if that was helpful. It's a start, he said. But you'd be surprised how many cases turn on one receipt. One video. One witness. I thought about Anna's message. I thought about the deleted footage. And then I thought, maybe I didn't need to catch Meredith lying. Maybe I just needed to catch her slipping. Because up until now, she'd worked in shadows through paperwork, committees, and passive-aggressive policy enforcement. She'd made herself untouchable by hiding behind rules. But I had something stronger. The law. Real law, not HOA bylaws. Not meeting minutes and committee votes. And unlike her, I wasn't afraid to use it. It started the day after the case number went live. A yellow slip was taped to my front door. Thin paper, cheap ink, official HOA header at the top. Beneath it, noise complaint, suspected unauthorized animal activity. Handwritten underneath that, late-night poultry auctions reported by multiple residents. I stared at it for a long moment, unsure whether to laugh or scream. Auctions? At night? I didn't even have chickens anymore. I tossed the slip on the counter and made a note to call Deputy Clark. The next morning I found another envelope in my mailbox, this one thick, stapled, and creased like it had been jammed in hard. Inside was a formal notice of trespass, signed by Meredith Vaughn herself. It declared I was no longer permitted on HOA-maintained grounds, including the clubhouse, common green spaces, and administrative offices, pending further investigative review. She'd effectively banned me from my own neighborhood, a place I paid dues to maintain. I called the HOA office, got voicemail. When I emailed, I got an automated reply: "Your message has been received and logged for review. Do not respond directly to this address." 3 days later, a white SUV pulled up to the curb. Not Meredith. This one had a city seal on the door. Code enforcement. A man in a reflective vest stepped out, clipboard in hand, expression unreadable. "Got a complaint," he said, "about unauthorized fencing on your property line. You build something recent, Lynn?" I pointed to the reinforced coop gate. He nodded. "You file a permit?" I nearly choked. "It's a replacement lock on an existing structure." He shrugged. "Still needs to go through city channels. Can't be more than 6 feet tall or anchored in concrete without review." It wasn't. He cited me anyway, pending inspection. I asked who submitted the complaint. He didn't answer. Didn't have to. Every move had Meredith's fingerprint, but none of them stuck hard enough to fight. That was the genius of it. She wasn't throwing punches. She was throwing paperwork. Weaponized bureaucracy. A war of 1,000 cuts, designed to exhaust me, confuse me, smear me, piece by piece. I started noticing things. People staring longer when I walked by. Trash cans knocked over that I didn't remember leaving out. A neighbor across the street suddenly power washing her driveway every morning, even when it hadn't rained. Harmless on the surface, but together, it felt like surveillance. I began to second-guess my own instincts. Was I being paranoid? Or was this exactly what Meredith wanted to push me off balance before I could land the blow? I spent evenings documenting everything. Every notice, every letter, every passing SUV. I printed them, filed them, dated them. I bought a spiral notebook and started keeping a harassment log. Not for the HOA, for the sheriff. Because now I knew this wasn't just about chickens. It never was. This was Meredith's power play. Her version of law and order. She ruled the HOA like a petty tyrant with access to templates, fine structures, and the blind loyalty of a board too afraid or too disinterested to stop her. And she'd underestimated me. That was her mistake, because while she was busy playing petty tyrant, I was building a case. A real one, with real laws, real consequences. The law didn't care about Violation 14b, or club access rules, but it did care about forged documents, false accusations, misuse of authority, and soon enough, tampering with evidence. I wasn't just documenting for defense anymore. I was building for the counterstrike, and when it came, it wouldn't be through the mailbox. "You're gonna want to save that," I said quietly. I transferred the clip to a USB drive. Got a printout of the return log signed by the clerk. Even had him write a short statement and date it. By the time I got back to the truck, my hands were shaking, but not from anger. From relief. She could twist rules, erase footage, and flood my mailbox with violations, but she couldn't be in 2 places at once. The timestamp on the store video matched the hour my deleted coop footage vanished. She wasn't just sloppy, she was caught. That night, I emailed everything to Deputy Clark. 2 days later, he called. His voice was calm but different this time, tighter, clipped, like a man whose paperwork had just caught fire in a good way. "We're moving forward," he said. I leaned against the kitchen counter. "With what, exactly?" "A formal charge. Felony livestock theft, fraud, possibly tampering with evidence, depending on how we can trace the deleted footage. We've also looped in the DA's office." For the first time in weeks I exhaled. It didn't fix everything. It didn't bring the birds back. But it meant I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. And Meredith Vaughn wasn't untouchable anymore. I stood outside that night, beside the rebuilt coop. The air was still. The stars sharp. I imagined the sound of Ella clucking softly beside me. "I told you girls," I whispered. "I wasn't letting this go." And I meant it. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled with less than 24 hours notice. No agenda, no pretense of transparency. Just a terse email. Urgent community discussion re-code compliance incident. Attendance strongly encouraged. The clubhouse was packed. Rows of folding chairs filled the room. People stood along the back wall, murmuring. The air was humid with tension. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in weeks suddenly side-eyeing each other, wondering who knew what. Meredith entered last. Polo shirt replaced by a blazer. Clipboard tucked under one arm, calm. Controlled. Like a CEO walking into a quarterly earnings call, not a woman under active investigation. She tapped the mic once, offered her trademark polished smile, and began. "As many of you have heard," she said, "an unfortunate misunderstanding regarding an unapproved animal structure has caused confusion within the neighborhood." A few heads tilted. Meredith pressed on. "There were allegations regarding livestock theft. Let me be perfectly clear. There was no theft. The animals in question were unsecured and appeared feral. In the interest of community safety, I acted accordingly." She paused to let the room digest the phrase. Appeared feral. I felt heat rise in my chest. Then someone stood near the back. Anna, the retired teacher, who first tipped me off. She cleared her throat. "Meredith, is it true the sheriff's department opened a criminal case against you?" Gasps rippled. Meredith's smile flickered. "An inquiry? Yes. But that's standard. And it's being resolved. It's very routine." Someone else interrupted. Greg Winters, a board member. His voice was flat. "We weren't informed." Meredith turned slightly. There was no reason to alarm the board until the matter was clarified. Greg didn't blink. "You told me the chickens were wild strays, not microchipped, not registered." I stood. Every eye turned toward me. My folder was already in hand. Neatly stacked, labeled, ready. "Sheriff's Department Case N41-1187, I said. "Filed under Texas Agricultural Code Section 41. Theft of registered livestock." I walked to the front. The board hesitated but didn't stop me. Meredith's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. I flipped open the folder and pulled out the feed store clerk's statement. The video still, timestamp. Meredith Vaughn attempted to return my hens to a local feed store. She claimed she rescued them, but each bird was tagged, logged, and registered with the Texas Poultry Conservation Alliance. These weren't strays. These were stolen. I looked around the room at the people who once stopped talking when I passed, who averted their eyes at the mailbox. They weren't just chickens, they were part of my family. And if they were so feral, why'd she lie about where they came from? A silence fell, thick, heavy. One board member quietly stood, took off her name badge, and placed it on the table. She walked out without saying a word. Another woman near the back spoke softly. "She fined me last month for having too many wind chimes." Someone else added, "She threatened to report me for trimming my hedges on a Sunday." The murmurs grew. A slow awakening. Meredith adjusted her blazer, still clinging to composure. "I've always acted with the best interests of this community in mind." But now her voice didn't land the way it used to. The spell was broken. Control had slipped from her hands. And for the first time in months, I wasn't the one under review. Two sheriff's deputies stepped out of a county cruiser, blue and gold decals catching the light. Calm. Unhurried. They walked past my fence line without looking at me. They stopped at Meredith Vaughn's porch. She answered the door in a floral robe, still tying the sash, eyebrows arched in polite confusion. The kind she wore at board meetings, right before cutting someone off mid-sentence. She spoke first, too far for me to hear. Then they spoke back, loud enough for everyone within 3 houses to catch it. "Meredith Vaughn, you are under arrest for felony theft of registered livestock, tampering with electronic surveillance, and abuse of administrative authority." The words hung in the air like thunder. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. One man came out under the pretense of watering his lawn. A jogger slowed to a walk. And me, I just stood there, watching. No expression, no celebration, just quiet acknowledgement. She stammered something. A protest. One deputy read her Miranda rights, while the other gently turned her around. The robe shifted. Her little white dog barked from inside. They cuffed her on the same porch where she'd once handed me a fine with a smile, where she'd claimed authority she never earned. The cruiser door shut behind her, and then, just for a moment, as they pulled away, she looked back. Right at me. No words passed between us. She knew. We both did. Behind me, the rebuilt coupe stood clean and sturdy. The same design my grandfather once built by hand. No hens yet, but soon. The sky was clear, the neighborhood silent, and justice served. Meredith's house went up for sale 2 weeks after the arrest. The listing was careful with its language: motivated seller, quiet street, new leadership in HOA. By then, the board had been reshuffled. Greg Winters stepped in as interim president, and the rest followed suit, rewriting half the bylaws within a month. Section 14 gone. The fines against me voided. Every last one. There was even talk of amending the HOA charter to require transparency and external oversight for future enforcement actions. Funny how fast people change their tune when the gavel turns on them. But I didn't show up to the meetings anymore. I had better things to do. The coop was full again. 6 hens, healthy, vibrant, and full of personality. This time, I didn't name them after jazz singers. These girls had new names: Justice, Patience, Grace, Honor, Mercy, and Truth. Every morning, I feed them before the sun crests the oak line. And every evening, the neighborhood kids come by again, peering over the fence, giggling, slipping little hands through the wire to toss mealworms. Their laughter was something I hadn't realized I missed until it came back. Anna brought over a pie the week after the flock arrived. Said she was proud of me. Said the whole neighborhood was better for what happened, even if they hadn't had the courage to say so at the time. I told her I wasn't proud, just tired. But I thanked her anyway. Inside my kitchen, there's still one small reminder of everything that came before. A business card, pinned to the fridge with a novelty chicken magnet. Deputy Clerk, Travis County Sheriff's Office. In case I ever need it again. But I don't keep it out of fear. I keep it out of respect for what the law can be when wielded with purpose. For the quiet strength it took to fight back without ever raising my voice. The sky's starting to shift towards spring again. That amber light that makes everything feel softer. Hopeful. And sometimes, when I sit by the coop with a mug of coffee and one of the girls hops into my lap, I think about my grandfather. About Miss Lacey on the porch rail. About how peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from standing your ground. The battle's over, but the lesson stays. And the coop is full again. Ever had rules used against you by someone hiding behind a clipboard? Then you know the story's not just mine, it's yours too. Stick around. The coop may be full, but the fight for what's right, that's just getting starting. Because where there's silence, there's always someone ready to break it.